Woman of Inspiration Awards. Today is a great day, Woman of Inspiration. We have an exceptional guest with us today. For those of you listening and watching, we have 2020 Woman of Inspiration nominee, Tammy Sherger. Tammy is the founder of the I Am Worth It project. Now, Tammy has a remarkable story. Of course, women with inspiration, they are the women that step into these roles because they have a story. Every woman has a story, but women of inspiration have a remarkable story and a journey, and we get to share in that journey with Tammy today. Now, she wasn't always the founder of I Am Worth It project. I believe, we're going to talk about that story where it started as you being a teenage mom at the age of 16. Pin drop. As we have kids that are, my son is 14. Mm-hmm. So thinking about his maturity at that age, and even just a couple years from now, and that frontal, lobe in the front of your brain, it doesn't really develop until you're 25. So, stepping into the role of a parent at 16, Tammy, welcome. Let's dive in. I would love to share your story with the listeners today. A remarkable journey.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I am so excited about the Women of Inspirations, and you've done amazing work in helping women, like you say, stand out in their own light. And yeah, it did start at 16 as a teenage mom. And when I look back, it's funny, I was just having a conversation with my son this morning on our walk about looking back at that 16-year-old girl. I really did believe I knew more than I actually did. So, that is a fact about being a teenager. But I was scared, I was petrified. And more importantly, I think when I look back at how that began, we all have a perceived right path in life that we learn from our parents and our environment. And for me, it was to finish high school. It wasn't important where I came from to go to college, but to finish high school, get a good job with a pension so I could stay there for 40 years, get married, have 2 children, retire, have some grandchildren. And if I'd worked hard enough, go and do some traveling. So what happened that moment that I realized that I was going to have a baby was that I also gave myself a life sentence because I had fallen off that perceived right path. So I created this prison of my own making, caged by false beliefs that I would never be successful. The bonus is, though, because I loved my children so much that I worked against that my entire life to achieve that success. But believe me, when I look back at that picture with my son, he's 42 now, and he was 2.5 weeks old, and I think, oh my God, girl, you didn't even know. Didn't even know.
So I want to take you back to that moment. Is that moment etched in your head, Tammy, forever as a 16-year-old girl figuring it out, still in high school?
Yeah.
Do you remember that moment when you took that pregnancy test? What was that feeling like?
I more remember the moment I had to tell my parents. And I was very lucky. We didn't have a lot of money. My dad worked really hard, but my mom loved her children. So she was like the mother of all mothers. That's what we were actually talking about this morning, is how she never really made me feel bad. But I knew I had disappointed her because, as parents, we have hopes and dreams for our children, and even though it wasn't said. But what I do remember is really just fear, like, what was I going to do? So that was one side. And then pride as that teenager, like, how can I take care of this myself because it was my mistake? It was those two sides kind of going along with each other. But mostly it was fear, like, what was I going to do? Like, how was I going to do this? And I also knew my life would change, and it did.
So tell me, there were some big decisions that you had to make at the time, and it takes 9 months to make a baby. So at least you had 9 months of grace to figure it out as you go along. But Let's talk about some of those defining moments at that time during that 9 months when you're really, it's such a beautiful moment in a woman's life that is such a true gift to have.
Yeah, I think, you know what, it's a little different when you're a teenager. So, you know, I don't think as that experience that I see women who are older and maybe more planned for that, because a lot of that experience carries shame, right? So, you know, the shame of making a mistake that goes against what, you know, is culturally said to be the right way to do things. So when I look back, you know, and a change in my life, because I was at school, I was popular, I had a boyfriend, I did all this stuff, and then all of a sudden, now I'm at home. Bless my parents and my mom in heaven, right? Because she would play cards with me every night. We'd go walk, but my life was not the same anymore. So it was the shift and the shame, right? And so and then the fear of childbirth, like what was that going to be like? But more importantly, what was I going to do after? And I think that was one of those things for me where, you know, and it was pride. It was really just pride, because even though I knew that my parents would help me, I really did have a firm sense and a belief that I had done this and I needed to make it right.
Your moral compass said, I am going to own this responsibility.
That's right. Yeah.
That's a big one at 16. Now, your parents were very supportive of your decision. And in reading your bio, I do know that you got married young. So
I did, yeah.
What was that decision? Talk to us about making that decision.
Yeah, so, you know, it's great. This is what I love about being at this point in my life. The benefit of age is being able to look back with hindsight. But, you know, when I put myself back in that position, the night I brought my son home from the hospital, so his biological father was a teenager too, and was obviously scared and decided he'd flee, right? You know, and that's what happens. That's the story. But I brought my son home from the hospital, and we lived in a 2-level duplex, and my room was downstairs. And I had my son, and he was in my arms, and he was crying. And all of a sudden, I started crying. And that thing about wanting to do it myself, I said to him, I don't know how you can do this, but you need to cooperate with me. We're in this together, and I need you to help me. And what's interesting about this is that he actually stopped crying. I knew I could have went and got my mom. I knew that. And when I look back, I bet she was standing at the top of the stairs just waiting for me to call her, right? But from that moment on, what was so interesting about my son was that he was just the best baby ever, right? And we often look back now, because he does help me in my business. He has his own business. But when we look back now, I think it was just that moment of synchronicity, or two souls who were meant to connect together. Now, the thing about it is that I didn't have any education. I was working part-time at a fish and chip store for, I think it was under $5 an hour. So it was probably about $4.25, and it was only part-time. And I needed a way to find security for him. And I met this man who, the first time we went out on a date, I remember this so vividly. We were in Kmart, and he opened up his wallet, and he had a check in there, a paycheck that he hadn't cashed. And in my mind, I was like, oh my God, he's secure. How could anyone have a check that they hadn't cashed? So we were like there was two parts of us. I was looking for security, and he was looking for someone who he could view as less than, so he could feel better, so he could give me things that to him appeared simple, and I'd be grateful. So that was a recipe for disaster. And, you know, of course, when I look back, there was clues that this was going to be a marriage that had domestic violence, but we only look to fill that need that we have. And then we're very capable, unless we're aware, of just blocking out anything that doesn't go with that story.
Mm. So interesting. So you had what I call is the little stones. Here you go, Tammy. I'm going to just toss a pebble your way. And you're like, ow, that hurt. But you just keep powering through. And until the pebbles get bigger and bigger and they're boulders.
That's
So
right.
so you left the relationship. How did you leave that relationship? What
I
gave
was
you the
married.
courage to leave the relationship? How old was your son?
So I was married for 16 years. So I had had my daughter, and it was volatile. Of course, from the outside, Monica, it was a good life. We worked well together, and we traveled well together. And when I look back now, I can see, there were some very horrible things that happened, and it was not a good situation to also raise children in. But a lot of the time it did feed that small need of security, right?
Mm.
We both worked very hard. We accumulated a lot of wealth. And I learned probably in those first 4 or 5 years, because in domestic abuse, people always say, well, why do you stay? Why do you stay? And what they don't understand is that it's not even necessarily love. What happens is, it's like you say about the little pebble. So someone who has the ability to manipulate takes a small grain of truth, right? And wraps it in a bunch of lies. But when you don't feel worthy, which I didn't feel worthy because I'd made a big mistake, right? So I didn't think I was worth much. You don't see the grain of truth. You just see that whatever they say you are, you're not good with money. You're not, you can't cook. Well, really, the truth is, when you're living in that situation, you can't do anything, right? But when my children got older, because I tried to leave when they were younger, but he would grab them off the street. And so those things are reinforced, that don't leave, because if you do, your children will be in danger. And I always thought they were better off with me and were there than if he took them and ran away. And what if I couldn't see them again? But when I decided to leave, it was actually one night that was an accumulation of months where I had been, because he created this deal. I laugh now. And it's not, domestic abuse is not funny, but I laugh at my mind back there and how my low sense of self-worth allowed me to accept things like, so he would tell me I'm not good at money, but he made 50% more than me. And our financial deal was, I paid for everything, the mortgage, the kid stuff, and he saved his money for our future. So it was impossible for me to have enough money, right? So when I had started to think, you know what, I got to get out of here. My son was 16, my daughter was 14. I needed to show them another way of life. So I started funneling a bit of cash from our line of credit. And when I say a bit, it was a small amount. So I think it was a few $1,000s, because I thought I need something, because I knew once I left, I just knew that I would be out of it. It would take me a long time to get money. And so I came home one day in the mailbox, and there was the statement from the line of credit. And I made a choice that day. I said, if I leave it in this mailbox, he's going to open it up, and then there's going to be a decision to be made, or I can hide it again. So on that day, I turned around, I got back in my car, I left it in the mailbox, and I thought, today's the day. And it was the day that I left.
Wow. I have goosebumps, of course, because my story, I can relate a lot. I was not a teenage mom, but I was a single mom since my son was 7 months old. So a lot of this I can totally relate to, and my stones became big stones and boulders.
Yeah.
So I know exactly the manipulation and how you truly have this good heart and you want to bring out the best in the person, because you see they have good qualities. There are good qualities, and you seem to focus on the good qualities, but you forget about all the control and manipulation and lies. And there's a certain type of personality for that, right?
Yeah.
Narcissistic, sociopath. They're, they could do anything to anybody and walk around, not feel any remorse about it. So, the warning signs are always there, but it's not as easy to leave until you come to a point that it's like that there's a defining moment. You're like, can't do it. And, some women have the ability to plan it out a little bit before they leave. And I think you definitely have to do that. It's a good thing that you do, but I'm so happy to hear that you were able to start fresh, and you elude sunshine. I can't even imagine. Every time I've had the opportunity to connect with you, it's like smile ear to ear. And what you have accomplished, Tammy, is phenomenal. And, you know, so I'd like to talk now about how you have rebuilt your life, because that is really tough beans.
Yeah, it's funny because when I left, you know, we had built a lot of wealth, but we came to an agreement that, you know, if I accepted, I think it was $25,000, it was a small amount compared to what our net worth was, that he would leave me alone, right? Of course, that wasn't true, so I might as well have went. But in my mind, you know, my children were old enough, that helped me make that decision to leave, because I knew no matter what, even if he took them off the street, they could get away on their own. Or if he did something to me and I wasn't alive anymore, they would be able to say, no, I'm not living with you, right? So that gave me comfort. But when I left, so imagine you've raised children who have had a pretty good life, right? So they weren't necessarily spoiled, but they didn't want for anything. I mean, we waited payday to payday. If we needed more peanut butter, you just did without, right? And we moved into a rented townhouse. And of course, then I don't know how he was able to do it. I don't even know if he could do it nowadays, but he shut me out of everything, credit cards. He was the bank manager, everything. So that was fine. I was working at Costco then. I had been there maybe 3 or 4 years, something like that, but it was a good job. And I started over, and my children, they were glad that I had made that decision, but of course it was still hard for them. You know, we moved into the townhouse and my son's like, well, how are we going to do laundry? And I'm like, well, at the laundromat. And he's like, what is a laundromat? So they didn't get it, but what happened was we became a team, the three of us, right? So we became a team. And even through the next couple of years where, you know, we had to be careful when we left the house, and he would be phoning my warehouse manager, right? And, you know, saying, you've got to fire her. And I'm so grateful when I look back that, you know, the support that I received there, and some really good friends that, you know, if they seen a note on my car, they'd go pull it off so that nobody else would have to witness what maybe he left there. But the good thing, I guess, from that was that I realized that a lot of what he was saying about me was not true. But it was shortly after I had left that I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. So I had this story that I told, and it was true. And I'll say this to women, like, I know your story's true. So we can all go story to story. And my story was, oh my God, I was a teenage mom. I dropped out of school. I married before, you know, I was old enough to vote, into an abusive marriage. Finally, I get the courage to leave. Now I got cancer, right? But the blessing of the cancer, because I remember the day in the doctor's office and saying to the doctor, am I going to die? And the doctor saying, I don't know. And in that moment, if you would have asked me, Tammy, when you face, you know, if you have a moment to think before the end of your life, what will you be thinking about? I would have said, oh my God, all the mistakes I made. But I didn't. I was filled with this overwhelming sense of regret, not for the things that I had done, but all the dreams I didn't go after. Because the whole part of accepting bad behavior is you don't feel you're worth more, right? Now, I wasn't thinking about worthiness at that time, but what I did make a commitment was that if I lived, I would never, you know, when the time came when I was facing the end of my life, I would never have that sense of regret ever again. And I do believe also, looking back, that's where the seeds of the I Am Worth It project were planted, because I didn't realize in order for me to go after those dreams, I would have to work on worthiness. So when I see women now, or I talk to women who are in or have been through domestic abuse, I always say, look, we could tell exactly the same story using different names, because it's what it is. It happens almost the same way to every woman, because there is a pattern to it, right? And that you didn't do anything wrong, and there was nothing you could do. It wouldn't matter how hard you tried. There is nothing that you could do, because the dynamics is that person needs somebody who's less than, so they can feel better. And the only way they can feel better is that you're less than. I can remember he used to say sometimes to me, could you stop using those words? I'm going to need to get a dictionary. And I'd think to myself, okay, now I mean, words just come out, but it was because he didn't understand it, right? And so it allows me to connect with women on a different level, though, because, you know, That's one thing that when I started this journey of the I Am Worth It project, I made a commitment to open my entire life up to examination and tell my stories as gifts. And that because there's a lot of things I did hide during my corporate life, right? Because I didn't want people to know, because I thought, oh my God, I might not get that promotion or whatever. But now it's like, you know what? No, because then you know you're not alone.
Mm. And I have to completely agree with you that when you're going through it, whether it's for the safety of your kids, your own safety, you have to keep the circle fairly small. But I think that as you go through it, because when you're going through it, you have to keep laser focused on getting through the situation.
That's right.
And not a lot of people will understand what you're going through. So you have to have your core support team get through it and then do something with it.
That's
because
right.
that's the resilient piece. It's like we are not tested for that bigger purpose unless we have that bigger plan. And it doesn't necessarily reveal itself until the end.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's like the journey. So when you're in it, just say, thank you.
That's right.
What have you got to teach me? Let's figure out how strong I am. And I share that with you.
Yeah.
We would never, ever test ourselves the way life unfolds for us sometimes and presents these challenges. Yeah. You couldn't possibly sign, okay, I want to be strong. Can you just load it on? Yeah. Like there's no way.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
so that's the hardest thing is when you're talking to people and the listeners that are going through stuff right now, you will get through it. Tammy story, my story, all the women that are going and coming out the other side, you're going to get through it. And it's hard to say, embrace this time is the biggest lessening gift that you could ever possibly have, because you will now realize your superhuman power.
Yeah, your talents. And I think that's true, that's true about life will test you more than you would test yourself. I really like that. And it is true. And I think for me, one of the things that, when women are ready, it really is about how I tell my story now, because how you tell your story is how your life is, right? So for me now, oh my God, I'm so grateful I was a teenage mom, because I had such a drive to do better for my children, that even though I had sentenced myself to a life without success, even though I always felt less than other people, I literally worked my way up from the stockroom floor to the boardroom table, right? And that was against everything I believed I was capable of. And then, even that marriage experience, there's a lot of things I learned during living in a situation like that about being in tune and noticing people and body language. And there's so much stuff that I learned that I use now, right? And it also allowed me to really develop who I am. And cancer was the biggest gift to me, because when you get a moment where you don't know if you're going to live, then you really appreciate your life. So I think when you can start looking at those obstacles and just kind of making a little shift in your story, because it's a different story that I tell. It's one of, like you say, optimism and determination and success.
And I have got to say, your story is going to, for our listeners that are listening, I hope that you're taking notes. Okay, Tammy, so we've heard your personal journey and where you get all this like massive amounts of woman strength and confidence, which is really important for women to have. Now, tell me how that has helped. And I have a feeling that that confidence through all the adversity that you've been through has almost helped you reach for those bigger goals. So tell me about that career path that you have, because you said, from working at, stocking the shelves to the boardroom table. Yep. There are women listening going, what's my next step? How can I use my experiences to give me the confidence to ask for that position or job or opportunity?
Yeah, so I love business. So I love to teach women to be worthy, because I believe that's a foundation for success. It changes how you operate, but I love business and I love business strategy. And the gift, because I didn't I'm a proponent of education, by the way, but because I didn't go and get book learning, I had to learn everything in a different way. So I look at, you know, when you go to school and you get the book learning, that's about your hard skills. You're an accountant, an admin, an HR, a doctor, a lawyer. What we don't get taught and what gets overlooked by companies is what they call soft skills. And I have to tell you, I don't like that word or those two words, because it's those soft skills that you need because when you go out into the real world, you're going to deal with real people and you're going to have to lead and ask for your raise and promotion from them. So we don't get taught, and especially as women, it's different. So I was at Costco. You know, I had done a bunch of different things. My first job was at Ponderosa Steakhouse for $1.35 an hour. So I could get a pair of Star jeans. They had a star in the back pocket. And I was like, I really need these jeans. And I was at Costco. And after the divorce, I decided that I would move up into management. It wasn't something that was really part of what I was thinking of doing at the time, because you know, I was going to retire early because we had earned a lot of money, right? But of course, the divorce happened, which was a good thing. I loved Costco. So I love everything. It's not even just about shopping, which is a good thing at Costco too. But what I love about Costco is the business model. So I was fortunate that I was able to, and I took the steps to move around every piece of the business in Costco. So the whole entire warehouse, other than I overseen the fresh foods. I never actually worked in them. I helped them clean sometimes, but every piece in that business model is so incredible. And it taught me the intrinsic value of presentation, of creating a client experience, because when I first started there and they told me they were going to ask people for money to shop there, I was like, are you kidding me? Who would pay to shop somewhere, right? And then I realized, so I was there for 19 years, and I decided to move into management, and I became a front-end manager, and then I worked my way up to an assistant warehouse manager. But my real aha moment at Costco was when I took over this executive program. So we introduced a second tier. Maybe you have a card, a black card.
I do. I have a Costco tier card. Yes, I am a member, and I love Costco.
Yeah, so we introduced that executive membership. And I mean, I was a big fan of Costco. I believed in the value, right? So I was out in Red Deer and I took it to #1 in our store and helped drive the region to #1 in the sales of this executive card. And then they said, well, now we got to take you to the highest volume store. And I remember them telling me, these people are going to eat you alive, because they were senior staff members that have been around for a long time. And I was afraid that's the South store. There's way more stores now. So when I went out there, but I have this thing about leadership where, and I teach this now, but what I did know is that I could connect with people. I could influence them. And one of the things is because I was a person of my word and I set high expectations, but I would also help you, whatever it is you want it to do, you come to me. And if you asked me something, I would always come back to you. So I really believed in the communication part of the leadership. So I went out there and drove that store to #1 and helped really drive the region. And that, got me an assistant warehouse manager's job, but there was a moment where I had to make a decision. I was offered an opportunity to go into BC to become part of their corporate office marketing department. My next step was a store manager. I'd been there 19 years. My kids had moved out now. And I thought to myself, and I'm sure other women have thought, is this it? Am I going to do this for the rest of my life? And at that time, Lowe's was coming into town. And so they recruited me, they scooped me up, and they paid me like $10,000 more than I was making. So at the time when I went there, and I say this because it's so important that women talk about money, because money is the fuel for our dreams, and women don't like to say the word. So I talk about, I love money because it is part of freedom, right? And so they paid me $10,000 more, and I went there and I call Lowe's my rebound job because I didn't know what I was thinking. I hate hardware, right? And so for the first time ever, I came back after 3 months. I gave it my all. I quit a job. I had never just quit a job before. But the blessing was, as I landed at this startup company that was converting waste energy into usable electricity. And I went in 6 times to get a job. They were hiring an HR manager. The CEO interviewed me 6 times. On the 6th time, by then I was like, he's either hiring me or and that's what I told him. Look, you're never going to, I know I don't have a degree. I know I don't have the credentials, but you'll never find anyone who will work as hard as me. And I've never had a boss who I didn't deliver to. So he hired me. And I took a big pay cut, and that job, that role completely changed how I believed about myself. It was amazing.
So it had to do with, you better hire me because I'm worth it.
I was like, that's the one thing I always knew, is that I was good at I'm an operational strategist. So I look at things, and for whatever reason, we all have our gifts. I see solutions quickly, right? So I can pivot and move, and sometimes, I work harder at my visionary part. I am a visionary, but I like order, and I like to try and make order. But that role and getting that job, it did 2 things. One, it sent me into where one of my biggest false beliefs was that I wasn't as smart as other people because I didn't graduate from high school. And so here I landed up at a business that everybody had letters behind their names, up to and including a rocket scientist, right? And I was thinking to myself, oh my, what am I doing here? I never worked in an office. And they put me in this little room, which I didn't know at the time was a computer room. And, but they were worried that I would walk out the first day, but I was so happy I had a door. At Costco, you never had a door, right? So that experience is really it busted all my false beliefs and built my worthiness up.
I love that. That is so incredible. I hope that our listeners, those people that are watching, can take those experiences. And, when I play this, I know that we're going to have people in, senior executive roles that are hiring, and and I think there's a shift in sort of life experience, especially since COVID and the pandemic.
Right.
It's certainly, the leaders are like, I always like to say, it's like popcorn popping. The leaders are like popping up left and right. And you know what, they're just the ones like taking off and zoom, and they're confident, and they're pivoting, and they're coming to the table with ideas, because that's what a lot of companies are doing now. They're like, so has anybody got a great idea? Bring it forward. And it has nothing to do with the background, your alphabet soup behind your name. It's like, who's got the best idea? I want to hear them all. So I think that's really important, is that confidence, and take that chance on that. Take that chance. And women if you're listening, you know what? You've worked really hard for things, you believe, and you've got, whether it's the life experience, you've got the education and life experience combination, go get it, ask for it, tell them what you're worth. It's so important. I love that, Tammy. Yeah. So powerful.
Yeah, and it is true. And I think, it was interesting because I had a young girl that was 24. She was a human resource professional. I used to always tease her, you're the real HR person, right? But I hired her as I moved up into a higher role. I ended up being the chief administrative officer of the company. And she would used to say to me when she first started, she would say, okay, I've got this book and it tells me to do this. And she'd go out, because I'd let her try it. And she'd come back and it's like, it's not working. I said, because those are people, right? So you want to take your experience that you learn, and that helps in process building and such like that. But when you're dealing with people, it's a little bit different. I love, and for her, I was a different kind of boss because she had been pigeonholed in recruitment. But because I had worked, my way up, I was very confident in my work. So I think one of the things we can do as women is be so willing, I would give her all my knowledge. I didn't care, right? And that's one of the things she says in her testimonial about me is that, Tammy wanted me to be successful, not because she would look better, but because she wanted me to be successful. Mm-hmm. And I think because there's so few roles, because I was the only woman at the boardroom table and in the meeting, even at Costco as a manager, right? But the one time where it really came clear to me is the president, who was a man, invited us to a YPO event, and of which he was a member. And so we all went. There was like 500 or 600 people there, right? And they had presentations, and then we all broke to go to the bathroom. So as a woman, Like you're usually in a hurry because you know what's going to happen. And I walked up to the bathroom and the men's was lined up and I walked right in and I was like, oh my goodness. Like this is, you know, it was a big eye opener that was right in front of your face. Like you say, for me, it's about like, yes, we do need companies and government to make some changes, but what we also need to do is empower women in the skills because worthiness, when you don't feel worthy, I mean, I waited till I was 53 was the first time I didn't accept what was offered to me, right? I was always waiting for someone to notice me, for them to decide what my raise should be. But when you're worthy, you're going to speak up and say, actually, no, I'm worth this amount of money. So it's so essential that we believe in ourselves.
And, you know, I think that if we talk about confidence being so really important, you're sharing your knowledge. That is a sign of confidence. Yeah. So, you know, when you've reached that confidence point, if you can actually do that self-test, are you actually sharing your knowledge? Because if you are, that's a warning. If you're not sharing your knowledge, or you're putting up barriers for other women around you to not succeed, you're not as confident as you say you are, right? So I really love to see, and I always watch for that. I'm like, so who's sharing the knowledge? Who are the confident ones who walk the talk, lead by example? Those are the women of inspiration we want to surround ourselves with, right? And I think that it's a great role model for a younger woman to see that happening, where we're actually supporting each other. It's really important. I also want to talk about that room and your boardroom table with the men. Of course, you know that we launched our Support Her, which is, you know, a movement to, you know, champion, you know, give men the tools that they need to champion for women, their networks, workplaces, and communities. Your son's a Support Her, I guarantee it.
He is, yeah, he totally
is. Single mom, and, you know, and being part of that team. But it's so important that we identify men that are champions. They get it, they understand the challenges, but not all the time do they have the tools. So that's what we're sort of helping them out with. I'd like to know is, who were those Support Hers in your world?
So for me, it really was the CEO of that power company, because I mean, when I didn't know anything about converting waste energy into usable electricity, and the first time I went to hire engineers, I didn't even know that there was different disciplines. I thought they were all the same. Right? I would go into meetings and I would write down all the words: power prices, oil prices, bottom, low, all this stuff. Words I didn't know. I was from Costco, right? And he would then sit with me. Listen, entrepreneurs are a combination of brilliant and crazy. You have to be.
Oh, I'm going to say a lot of crazy. Yeah. Like I always say, embrace your crazy. They're really crazy.
Yeah. But he was a combination of that. But the one thing he respected was the one thing that I gave, and I deliver. That's what I do. And I teach people how to deliver because it's a missing skill, right? But he would sit and he would, you know, we'd go through the list of words and he'd explain it to me. He'd draw, he loved to go on the whiteboard. So he would take that time to really help me understand the entire business. So he completely supported me. Now, that being said, I delivered. So it was a win-win relationship. And there's a couple things about being the only woman. I was in the boardroom. It was a board meeting, and there was heads of oil and gas, the premier of Alberta at the time, and so me. So there was probably about 10 people in the room, and we're sitting around the boardroom table. We were going to conference in our Ontario office, who were the engineers. And of course, right away, my CEO turns to me and says, "Oh, Tammy, like, I don't know how to use the phone." And you know how you have those aha moments? I love them because they're transformational. And I realized, you know what? Yeah, I did know how to use that phone, but I had built the entire infrastructure of that business, including all the training and development, how to master the art of the meeting, that won an award from an oil and gas company. The way we conducted our meetings helped them raise $70 million in equity. But I was taking my value from being the only person who knew how to use that phone. So I did it that day, and then I forgot how to use that phone. And I say this because this is so important. That there are some things that are out of your control as a woman, and there are things that are within your control. And we have to be very careful that we are, value, how you value yourself. You have to make sure it's not over things, because when it is over those small things, like being the go-to person and the first one in and the last one out, those are feelings, and you're going to get resentful, and you're going to wonder why these mostly men, because it is men, and honestly, it's not even really their fault right now. You know what I mean? So how can you empower yourself? It was a pivoting moment in my career where I thought, oh my God, I got to take some ownership here, right? And I think that as women, we could do so much more. Now, as men, it's interesting because now that my son and I have worked more together, and we're working on the I Am Worth It project, which is about empowering women. And so he's more aware. So often we think men are more aware than they really are, right? So that we think that they're reading our minds, and they're not, okay? Because even my son has said, he went, I won't name any names, but he went to this event. I think it was at Christmas time. And there was a young woman there who we have worked with, helped design our studio. And he said, he came back and he said, Mom, I didn't really realize this before, how different it is for a woman in that kind of situation. Because, because men and women have different types of relations, business and other relations, right? Sometimes men will look at like an event like that, like a social thing. Oh, come on over here. Oh, you look so great in that dress, and you're right. And he said, I never actually noticed it though, Mom. So this has made me, so I think it's more about awareness, because sometimes they're just not even aware, especially when it comes to women and emotions, right?
And men too have emotions, right? But it's that toolkit that enables the opportunity to build awareness, to make a difference, and to actually step in. And
absolutely, the
support system is so important. And I can't tell you how many opportunities and how important that is for men to feel valued, that they are offering value and helping and support a woman on her journey. It's game changing for moving the needle. And, I literally, if I think back to when I launched it, was at the height of Me Too, 2018, Time's Up. And I looked at my son, who was 12 years old at the time, as a single mom, as I'm out to go out for International Women's Day, and just lift that roof. And, I looked at him and go, where are your role models? Where is this going to be an opportunity for you to champion for a woman? And I got to focus on that too. Like, we can't forget about half the population here. Like, we're not going to make the mountains move until we have that balance and that respect that we want, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, that was a big pivotal moment for me, but I love, love, love. I could talk all day long all about that, because I truly believe, as leaders of organizations, and certainly our mission is to raise the profiles of women, regardless of what stage of life you're in or industry, entrepreneurs and professionals. It's a melting pot where everybody's valued, everybody's seen, everybody's heard. So I want to talk about, and sort of, we've talked about some great things already, your background, your career path, pivoting, owning your story, owning your power. Now I want to talk about, right now, we were just coming out of, this is 2020. We've just experienced something that I still shake my head and go, did that really just happen?
Yeah.
I just have to, sometimes when I go for my walks, I'm like, did we really experience what I thought we did? It's just so unbelievable what has happened in the past 6 months. So COVID has tested us all and given us all that platform to be resilient. How would you say that your adversity prepared you for dealing with COVID?
Well, I think I am well prepared for adversity. I think a lot of it comes from what I believe, which is that, we have more power than we actually know. And I'm a big believer in the power of our brain and simple tricks and techniques that you can use in order to create an experience. And not like in law of attraction, but in real, this is how your brain works. We all have common human experiences. But we have all of us as human beings across the globe have been pushed firmly out of our comfort zone, which usually doesn't happen unless you have a life-threatening experience, right? So we've been pushed outside of our comfort zone. And when that happens, our brain tries to protect us. And so it does this by throwing out all these waterfall of negative thoughts like, oh my God, this is terrible, which some of it is, you can't do this. What do you think? Now you have no time, no money. So, and then we were also experience a lot of loss, loss of freedom, sometimes a loss of a job, our livelihood. How will we protect our family? It was really frightening for all of us. But the bottom line is that this, and this is what I always tell myself, this is where I'm at. But I'm not just going to survive. I don't want to survive because life is very, very short. And if I wish I could just drop this little drop into other men, women, I do it to my grandchildren, about how many dreams that are so possible for you. If you just could know that they're bigger than you imagine, now you've had that time, I say you've had that time to kind of grieve and adjust, and there's some things that are out of control. Now take charge of your success. So because I'm resilient and I face diversity, first of all, start up here because you need to work on your mindset. And that's just as simple as a routine every morning, and it's those three things. If you did these three things, first of all, set yourself three things that you're going to get done every day. And if you start this, I don't care if it's like, I got to brush my hair, put on my shirt and walk outside to the mailbox, but create three things that you're going to get done because it creates a sense of accomplishment and forward movement. And of course, there's way more you can do with it after you practice it. Secondly, have a thought for the day, because you know what, when you focus on something, and this is not woohoo, I always add that in there because I'm into woohoo too, but when you focus on something, it allows the blinders of your brain to open up because we can only take in so much information. My grandson wants a Lamborghini when he's 16. And he started talking about it. He's got big dreams. And he started talking about it. And when he did, I didn't notice, but I would go to the Costco, turn left on Heritage Drive, and on the right-hand side, there was this Lamborghini store. I never seen it until he started talking about it. So imagine what you can do by focusing on what you want, because it allows you to see people, places, things, and opportunity. And have a simple mantra. So my favorite one, because I have a couple, I have one I use when my eyes open, but my other one is, every day is bursting with opportunity when I wake up and know I'm worthy. And if you, now this is where the action comes in, which is what I can't do for women. If you did this for 30 days, it's not woohoo, you're creating a new pattern in your brain. It's the power of automaticity, a program your brain already runs, right? So for me, it starts with your mindset. You need to when you feel good, you can do good. So always start there. So every day I prime my mind for success, because just like you or me, when I up level, I'm scared. My brain goes into brain on change and it's telling me, lady, are you crazy? You're 59, right? What are you doing? And then I'll have to say, that's not me. It isn't me saying that. It's a function. It's a common human experience, a function of my brain. And, I bring myself back and I say, now go get him, Tammy.
And I'm relating. I'm agreeing to absolutely everything that you said. And I am a little woohoo. I am so okay saying that. I'm super guided by the universe. Go figure that I should choose Universal Women's Network.
That's right.
As our name.
Yep.
Go figure. And I want to talk about something that you said, which was really interesting, was you said that your grandson wanted a Lamborghini. Well, my son went in, we went looking, and I took him in. Just, there's not too many things that we can do with our children as they get into the teen years that we relate to. He's a boy, I'm a girl, and interests are kind of, a little different right now. So I'm like, hey, let's go to, we were on our way to Costco, Costco South. And I said, hey, let's just go in and let's just look at some cars. So I called up my friend and said, hey, can we come in and have a peek? And so we had Saturday afternoon, we had like an hour and a half going through the Ferrari dealership. Now, what I did realize was that seed planted. He told me, Mom, $3,500 a month is all I need. That's a lot of dog poos, by the way, right?
That's
A lot
right.
of, that's it, mom, just $3,500 a month and, $50,000 down. But he
Yeah.
had it all worked out after that trip. But what I told him after the meeting that day was we got down to thinking about, so your actions and your leadership and and the things that you're going to be doing in life will actually dictate whether you're going to get that goal or not.
Yeah.
And so when you're working on your, he's dabbling into social media right now, just, the stuff that all kids are doing. But I'm like, think about what you post.
Yeah.
They will only align their brand with people that are leaders. They don't want to see stuff that's, not great. If you don't have a good leadership track,
Yeah.
they're not going to want to sell the car and have their brand associated with that.
Yeah.
So it was like a wake up call for him. And I'm like, I thought it was brilliant. It's like for kids to think about the things that they're doing right now to set them up for success. So those doors and opportunities are open, and then keep on elevating through there. And we did an experience actually with the Ferrari dealership, which was super cool.
I seen that. Yeah.
New F8 Spider. And the only thing is I said, what, their dream's just a little bit further along than my dream. But there's absolutely no reason why we cannot dream that big, even bigger.
No, bigger, yeah.
Right? So I think for the women that are listening, I want to say that we had a great conversation with Tammy. I just want to wrap up by saying I'm so excited for the journey ahead, Tammy. You're a Woman of Inspiration nominee, and how does it feel? Like this is also another thing is, being nominated is one. How did it feel to be nominated as a Woman of Inspiration?
So I guess what I really loved about it was how it happened. So that's what I really loved, because it was a prime example of women helping women in what they do. And so the synchronicity, everything that happened with Safe Haven Foundation, Karen Sherbet, was just, I didn't even expect it. It wasn't anything that I expected. So for me, the fact that she took that time was exactly how I want all women. I want to be that woman. I want to make sure I make the time to be that woman. I want to help other women be that woman, because really we are all our own shining light, and there is so much room in the world for each and every one of us. And even if you're doing exactly the same thing as me, you're not me and I'm not you. And so that's the great thing, right? And so it doesn't matter. So for me, it was, obviously it was an honor, right? But it was more that I was like, wow, I can't believe she actually took the time, to do this. So it made my heart full, because that's how I want women to really, we need to support each other first, right? And really help each other to shine so bright that the sky is just overloaded.
Awesome. And, I have to say that Karen is our national ambassador for Women of Inspiration, which is amazing. Yeah. So being nominated by someone who carries the role and the title and walks the path, leads by example, is super, super amazing. So
still, it makes me emotional, actually, that she took that time. That's how much, you don't know what it's going to mean to somebody else, right? And so just to have someone, because it's time consuming to do what she did, right? And we all value our time. So I always say to her, what great work she does, and I really appreciate that.
Well, so Karen, if you can see this right now, if you're listening, if you're watching, I didn't bring any tissues, nor could I give you one, because we're on other ends of the screen. That's here. Right, but I actually always get that feeling when I see the ripple effect that it is making in the lives of the women that we're touching, not just locally, not nationally, but even globally.
That's right.
So it's beautiful to see the ripple effect. And, I'm so happy that you're part of the journey with us, and I look forward to what's in store next. We have some very big plans, but I want to thank you so much for joining us on the Woman of Inspiration podcast. It has been extremely authentic, chocked full of just beautiful, raw, real stories, and your passion jumps off the screen. So Tammy, I'm just going to leave with, I just always would like to ask, if there's some, for the listeners, if there's one piece of advice, what would you give to listeners right now that are in a situation, they're feeling a little bit stuck? What advice would you give them?
I really want you to know this, that no matter what you've done in your past or what mistakes that you may believe that you have made, or even if right now your future looks bleak, that you are worth it. You are good enough, smart enough, thin enough, educated enough, skilled enough to live the life that you dream about. And if there was one thing that I would have every woman do, is just take a little action. Don't worry about the end result. One little step, one little tiny thing, even if it is just brushing your hair today, and then do one more the next day. And you will be so surprised how an insignificant action will create a snowball of forward momentum, because you're worth it. You're worth it.
Amazing. Thank you, Tammy, for
Thank
being a guest on the Woman of Inspiration podcast today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Tammy Sherger, I want to say Sugar, you're a sugar, but it's Sugar. And Tammy, a remarkable story, founder again of the I Am Worth It project. We are going to put some details in the show notes of how you connect with Tammy, but I would invite you to learn more about Tammy's I Am Worth It project and her mission to help women step into feeling worth it. So thank you, Tammy, again for sharing this time with me this afternoon. And I look forward to the journey ahead with Women of Inspiration and the Universal Women's Network.
Thank you so much, Monica. This was awesome.
Thanks, Tammy.